Hello everybody and welcome back inside the box for another episode of Gunpla Kitbash with me, Kukamatsu. In this episode we'll figure out the integration of the waist unit and then do some reshaping work on the torso. So let's jump right in. Okay, time to look at the whole thing again now that we have the legs and feet done. I think it's looking pretty cool. I still am thinking of just raising it up a little bit like that. I think the proportions work just that little bit better when it's like that. And still planning on probably going a little bit wider with the upper chest area. But the first thing to start with is going to be this waist. The inner frame here is from the Styrene because that's what the legs attach to. So I think what I want to do is actually just trim it down to a point where they all kind of touch again. I have the back piece as well, but it's quite chunky back there, so it's going to be a lot of trimming and stuff to get that all working out. But I think it's also going to help when I put in the cable things again to have it sort of the same diameter as it was before. So I think that's the place to start. Get the flow going from the bottom to the top and see how it looks. This is the original inner frame from the Gouf Custom. It's much simpler than the Styrene is. I'm just trying to figure out a way to maybe try and replace this whole top section with a piece from this so I get all the connections automatically. That way I get all the movement ability and all that kind of stuff too, instead of trying to rebuild that on there or losing that movement ability. So this top piece does pop off. The peg is important. I'm going to need the peg to attach the torso on. So what I'm thinking is chopping just the top of this off here and then mounting it on there. So let's see how that goes. I'm going to start conservatively and chop it low. Okay, what I'm thinking now is to cut along around there, but then cut down so I still have this front section available, and I'll just clear a space out for it in here. Okay, I got everything kind of cleaned up there, and that's working pretty well now. I think the flow is going to be good between the legs and the torso, so it's time to move on to the next step. The next thing I want to do is extend this down a little bit to make the abdomen taller. So what I'm going to do is I have some thicker polystyrene. I'm going to put probably a couple of layers on there just to get the thickness that I want. This is 3.2 millimeters, so I think 2 layers of that is going to be plenty. And what I'll do is I'll glue it to the bottom of there and then drill a hole for the peg that is on the waist unit. And those trim off the big chunks with the nippers. And then add the second plate. Now it's time to do some filing. Okay, I think that's generally looking pretty good. Now I'm just going to go with a finer sanding sponge. This is a 240, and I'll work my way down 240, 400, 600, 800. And the goal here is not to be shaping anymore or do that with the rougher ones, but really this is about taking out the scratch marks that the rougher sandpaper and the file might have left over. And then each successive one will remove the scratch marks from the previous one and leave it looking nice and smooth, hopefully. Cool, that's looking much better now and feeling very smooth. I'm sure there are some imperfections in here that we'll discover once we paint it gray. Before I do that, I actually do want to drill out the hole in the middle that will accommodate the peg on the waist unit. Before I go ahead and paint that gray, I'm going to do the other parts that need extra styrene, just so that I'm doing all the processes at the same time rather than one by one. I want to add a little bit of extra width there. There's a little bit of space to play with there. I mean, some of that is needed for the arm to be able to move. My plan is not to have the arms up, but to have them kind of down like this anyway. So that gives me a little bit of wiggle room. That's looking about 3 millimeters. Actually, the styrene that I have is 3.2 millimeters. So that might work out just right. Even with that width in there, there's still a little bit of play in the arms, and that's going to be enough for what I want in terms of the pose. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. Okay, those are looking pretty nice now, and I just need to cut out the hole before I do the gray paint. So what I'm going to do is use this, my Dremel, with the side cutting tool, so that'll allow me to go in and then around the shape. Oh, I think that's looking pretty cool. So let's paint those 3 parts gray and see what final work needs to be done on the surface. Well, overall it's looking pretty good. A few small little spots, and there's a bit of a seam line there between the original styrene and the new styrene, so that's needs to be addressed. Just tiny little things to do, so I'm going to fill those up with some super glue and then sand them back and see how it looks. I think the key at this point is to not overdo it with the super glue, because you don't want to be sanding a really large area to try and get it down. So what I tend to do is just put a little bit on the end of a toothpick, and then that way I can just put just as much as needs to be put in there to fill the gap. The great thing about this activator that I'm using, which is called InstaSet, is that it doesn't strip the paint when you put it on. Some activators will strip back the paint, and so the nice thing about this one is that you can avoid that problem. And then from there I'll just use these 120 grit sanding sponges and just have a very light touch so I don't scratch into the surrounding area too much, and then have to repair that after. There we go, it doesn't take too much. And the irony is you're sanding off about 95–98% of what you just put on there, but the point is that that little divot that was in there is now filled. From there I switch to the 240 grit sanding sponge and do as usual. I'm going to go through all of the grits that I have. Something to watch out for is, depending on how thick that gray paint is, you can actually get a little lip if you don't sand it back, so you sort of have to make sure the transition from the sanded part to the painted part is nice and smooth again. The other way to avoid that problem would have been to strip the whole thing before I did the repair process, but when it's a little spot repairs like that, I like to just leave the paint on and then sand it back and make it nice and smooth. There we go, I think that's looking really cool. It's slightly more of a heroic proportion than it had before, and I think works better with the longer legs. That's some easy reshaping. I really enjoyed doing that, especially after all the hard work of the other parts. Doing something really quick and simple and easy like that and getting a cool result is super fun. And that is the end of the episode. In the next episode, we're going to do some kit bashing of surface details. So, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you give me a like down below. Check out the playlist for previous videos. Subscribe if you want to follow along, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.